I understand, and that's okay. God will give you the grace at the right time to do what you're supposed to do.
So I'm here with Ryan and Mandy. You guys can say hello whenever you want.
Hello.
Yo,
So just to start out with, I don't know, give us an introduction of who you are and what your present life status is, or whatever you want to, however you want to put it.
well, my name is Ryan Foster, and I'll let my wife Mandy introduce herself when I guess I get done. But
Sorry.
it's funny because it's an inside thing. When I'm on the radio, I always say they push the microphone closer to me all the time because I don't talk loud enough. And then you did it, and so it's literally what we were talking about driving up. So my name is Ryan Foster. I currently am, I would call myself an entrepreneur and just follower of God. And so we'll see where this conversation goes. There's a lot of God stories that I have, and just it seems to be a crazy kind of life. Um, have a catering company. I am a chef, and I run Agape School of Supernatural Ministry, and I lead urban agriculture conglomerate called Budded Matao on the south side of Peoria. And I have four, about to be five, beautiful kids. They all come out beautiful, so I know it's going to be a beautiful baby.
Yep.
I'm Mandy. I'm Ryan's wife. Let's see. I'm the keeper of the things. So he does all these businesses and all these things, and I'm the one that organizes everything in the background. I've learned how to do bookkeeping, not by choice, but I've gotten pretty decent at it because of all of the things. I'm the administrator for the Agape School of Supernatural Ministry that he runs with Bob C. Um, I homeschool our kids, who are about to be 12, 10, 7, 5, and then a new one on the way this summer.
It's exciting.
So that's
Sounds like you have two full-time jobs.
yeah, they don't pay well, but
Mm-hmm. So, as I understand, you guys were both raised up in church of sorts. As far as we step into your history, uh, what was that like? What was
I'll let you take this one first.
childhood in a Christian household, so to speak?
I
For
grew
you.
up in a very small town. Actually, I didn't live in town. I lived outside of town. But I just happened to be down the street from the country church, um, in a denomination that was everywhere down there. I didn't realize how many other denominations there were because most of the people were that denomination. And it was a job. It was a duty. Like you went to church. Um, so I was like there. I followed all the rules and everything, but I never really made a relationship with Christ. It was just, this is what you're supposed to do. This is what everybody does. All of my friends were of the same denomination. Um, and so it was just like, well, we go to church on Sunday or Saturday, depending on which one of the church buildings you went to. But yeah, that was
Mhm.
all the way until I got to high school. Well, junior high, high school, and I started to disagree with some of the things, and then that led um, into me still going because it was a requirement in order
Mhm.
to hang out with my friends, but not actively participating anymore.
Yep. And Ryan, what was your experience?
My experience was, I always tell people my mom's like the 13th apostle because we were forced to go, like, if the church's doors were open, we were there. And like choir practice, prayer meeting, and it was a traditional black church that didn't have an ending time, and so it's just, it started, and sometimes you get out at 2:30, sometimes 12:30. You don't know, and so I was always in church. I was in Sunday school. I was it was very strict, our household, and my mom was very overprotective of us. And so it was, um, yeah, yeah. So that's basically my upbringing. It was,
He used to say if the doors of the church were open, they were there.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and like there would be snowstorms, and there would be like five families there. My family would be one of the families that were in the church. But I can say that I never went to church willingly. Like I went, I didn't argue or anything, but I never went on my own. Like I want to go to church, and so that never happened my whole entire time when I was a kid. If I wasn't told or expected to go, I wouldn't have went.
I see. Yeah. And so you went to church, but not willingly for both of you, basically. Um,
Well, when I was there was a stint there when I was in like junior high when we had a minister that came from Africa, and I couldn't understand him through his thick accent. And so I willingly went then because it became a game to try and figure out what he was saying. And during that, I actually volunteered to serve at the service 5 days a week because he was of a mind that we should have service Monday through Friday and then the weekend services too. So for like an entire summer, I was his person that helped him with everything because I could just ride my bike to church.
mm,
But it still wasn't a relationship.
I see. So that was life through high school. Um, and I understand you guys met in college. Is that right? So
Yes.
what? Take me through that stage of life.
I can start that one.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give the bill. So in high school, I was, I guess, a popular kid, athlete type, and I started partying. And since my parents were very, very strict, I was very unique and sneaky in my partying. And they had to have smelled me that smelled like alcohol, but I guess they never associated me being like a drunk or anything. So it wasn't until one evening my senior year when I didn't make it home because I passed out. And they went looking for me because you had to be home at a certain time or it was just you're in trouble. And they found me in my friend's basement, and so that's not what you asked, but
Mm-hmm.
that kind of was the beginning of like my partying. And then I decided to go to college, and I was first put in at Bradley, and so I was accepted at Bradley, had a scholarship to go for free, but I had to stay at home. And because of that time when I was in the basement my senior year, I was grounded the rest. So I was like, you. So you're gonna extend my me being grounded into college? And I was like, no. And so I went and applied for a legislative scholarship, and I got it, and I could go to any state school in the state. And I asked which state school is the furthest from Peoria, and that was SIUC. And so then I went to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, and when I hit the campus, I completely lost my mind. Like from that point on, I got fully engrossed in the party scene. I was drinking probably 5 nights a week
Mm-hmm.
there and just all into the night. But there was something that was good from my childhood that kept me in school. And I actually got Dean's List the first
Oh
semester.
wow.
It's because we didn't miss school. Like my brother and I have like perfect attendance from kindergarten to senior in high school. We didn't miss school. And so I didn't know how to not go to class. And I would crawl across the field, but I would be in class, every class. And somehow I got Dean's List, and I was literally drunk like 4, 5 nights a week. And I didn't meet Mandy until my junior year. And I tell her
Mm-hmm.
I kind of settled down a lot because I did a lot of crazy and stupid things. Like it kept on building up and building up in my college years, to the point I remember one time I stopped drinking for like 6 weeks, and then I went out to a party, and it was my first time going to a party sober because usually I show up and I'm already, they call them pregame. And when I showed up there, everybody looked at me and raised their glass and started screaming my name. I had no clue who anybody was in that party.
Oh wow.
And so that was a reality check. And then I stopped drinking after that for a little bit. And but I always picked it back up shortly after that. So I came to Mandy my junior year, and yeah,
Well,
you
you
go.
didn't come to me.
Yeah.
My roommate was a raging alcoholic and liked
Mm-hmm.
to drink with his roommate. So that's how like we knew each other because of people in my dorm that he played baseball with, and then my roommate drinking heavily with his roommate, and I was always the DD. Um, College, that was the question.
Yeah, yeah. What brought you to S I S I?
SIUC.
Yeah, that one.
So I actually was in massage school. I graduated high school early because I hated it, and I went to the local community college down there. And then when I was in massage school, one of the other students had done a 4-year degree at SIUC, and so she convinced me to just come down and look at the campus. And there's literally a woods in the middle of campus that were given to SIUC with the caveat that the only thing that was allowed to be maintained were the walkways. If a tree falls, as long as it's not on a walkway, they have to leave it. There's no electricity, nothing. So it's like this beautiful little nature oasis. And growing up in the country, I was like, yeah. So I applied for a scholarship, and I got a scholarship there that paid full tuition for 3 years if I studied German. So I was a German major, and that's how I ended up down at SAUC. His junior year, it was technically my sophomore year, but it was kind of like starting as a freshman
Mm-hmm.
because all of my classes had been in massage therapy, and
Those don't transfer.
those don't really transfer. I didn't have to take Logic 101 like everybody else because my business ethics class counted for that, but that was about it. So then that's how I met him.
Okay. What? How did your life change after that?
It didn't change much at all. She basically came on. It was about after a year did we move into. Oh no, it was less than a year we moved into that house.
Yeah, so he lived in an apartment in a townhouse with some guys, and then they moved into a house, and the selling feature for the house to rent it was that it had a full basement that was soundproof.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea was to turn it into a party house. And we'd been dating for a while by then. He still wouldn't call me his girlfriend. Um, but we'd been dating for a while, and so I just became one of the bartenders at the party house for them. I had some lovely nicknames given to me because I admittedly kicked out more people than anybody that lived in the house because I was always the one that was sober at the parties because I was serving the drinks illegally. Um, uh, but no, our lifestyle then was partying together.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
She would actually. She kept me in line to an extent. Like she'll bring up, like our kids will run across the living room with a towel on as a cape, and she'll start to giggle like she is right now because she can picture me running across the party house in just a cape, and her trying to chase me to get me to not be stupid.
Mm-hmm.
yes, I did keep him from some stupidity a couple times, but at the same time, he was a lot bigger than me, so there wasn't much I could keep him from doing if he wanted to. Uh,
So our lives didn't like when we first met. She was probably agnostic,
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and she would cuss me out if I talked about God. And in my core, I was a believer, even though I you couldn't tell it from just being around me because I was the one who was. If something went wrong, I was the one that was going to beat you up. I would
Mm-hmm.
come after you and throw you down the stairs. I would hurt you because when you're running a illegal party house, you can't call the police when something goes wrong, and so we ran it off of fear. Like you mess up, I'm coming after you, and if I come after you, it's not even the threat of just me. Like the whole party house is coming after you. It's like I don't care how big you are, you can't fight off like 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, at the same time, though, that there was something that everybody knew because oh gosh, it drove me so nuts. All the girls loved him because he was safe. He was the one person they knew was never going to take advantage of them if they were drunk. So he was the one they would all call. He was the one that they would all gravitate towards anytime we were out because he wasn't someone who was going to do something inappropriate. And at Carbondale, that was an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was like, I mean, as a girl, you can tell.
Yeah.
so that was also something from my upbringing. So there was those things that were coming through, even though I was a crazy party drunk person in the streets and ran the biggest party house down in Carbondale for a couple years. Um, there were like those little threads of things coming through, I guess is what she's saying.
Well, and
Yeah.
then um, oh, he was in grad school. So he stayed down after he graduated with his bachelor's because he wasn't ready to leave yet, and I wasn't done, so I was all for it. And then that's when life actually changed for us.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was just gonna ask what brought about change because obviously things are different.
Oh yeah. Well, I went out to the bars, and they said last call, and I slapped $100 bill on the bar and said line up shots,
I was
and
not there.
she was not there. And these are like, and like today, like I don't know how much they charge for a shot. I don't really go out to a bar, but they're expensive. Down in a college town, it's like $2 to $3 a shot. So $100 is a lot of shots. And so people all gathered around. I took about 6 to 7 of them really quick, and then I left, got inside of my car, and took off and just spinning out and going down the road. Well, in Carbondale, there's a lot of one-way streets, and especially on what they call the strip. And I went the wrong way on a one-way street, and there's police officers that are always parked on this corner because that people do this all the time. They come in the
Mm-hmm.
bars or on this one-way street, so there's always someone driving the wrong way, and that's how you know they're drunk. And so they promptly pull me over. I probably made it, I don't know, 30 feet on the
Mm-hmm.
one way, and they pulled me over, and I was pretty cocky. Up to this point, they've been trying to catch me for years, and I mean, I would have people sneak me out the house, and it was pretty elaborate. They never could catch me. And so when they got me, I was just pretty cocky, and I was like, "Oh, they're not going to get me. I can beat a field sobriety test." And so they were having me do this walk, and I was so cocky. I was like doing curtsies and spinning and stuff, and trying to land on the line and keep walking straight, and which is a really dumb thing to do, also. And then I just remember handcuffs going on me, maybe, and thrown in the back of a car. And I was down at the station, and then I called Mandy from the police station, and I told her where my money stash was, and told her to come and bail me out. And she came, and it still hadn't hit me because I think I was bragging about it.
He was so cocky when I picked him up from the police station. I was just staring at him like, are you kidding me? Because it was like 2 a.m. at this point, and I had been asleep at home. Um, and he was just joking with all the police officers. Like, they weren't, I wouldn't say they were agitated with you, like, as the sober person in the room. I think they were just kind of like, oh, thank goodness he's out of here.
And the thing is, like, I remember that night they had me they let me walk around the police station because I was just joking around. They could tell I wasn't going to hurt anybody, and I was just talking, and they just let I wasn't in a cell. I was just walking around the police station waiting on her to bail me out. And so, but yeah, that was it was the next morning when it hit me that I had this ticket that said it was driving under the influence. And at that time, I was a graduate assistant in the office of the president of the university. And so, and that paid my tuition, and it paid me a stipend every month. And so I was sitting pretty nicely for a college student. And I was like, I'm going to lose my assistantship and they're going to kick me out of school. And then my mom's going to find out what I've been doing down here. And that scared me more than anything was my
Mm-hmm.
mom finding out. And I looked at Mandy. I said, I know you don't like it when I talk about God or anything, but I got to go to church. And that was the first time I ever went to church on my own, like me choosing to go to church in my whole entire life was that moment. I just said I got to go
Yep.
because through the all those years of Sunday school and everything, I knew the promises, though I didn't really operate towards them. And so that came to my mind. It's like I don't have any hope, and I hope all these things that were said were true because I need something right now. And then she's just like, "Sure, I'll go with you." And I was like, "Whatever, I don't care." And it's just you could pick up there.
So, before we went to church, he wanted to go, and so he got a card and cookies, and he brought him to the police station, and he wrote a note apologizing to his booking officer. And we dropped those off at the police station first because he remembered the verse about, if you have aught with someone, you take care of that first before you come to the altar. Um, and then he took me to this little itty bitty church, and it said that the start time was 11. The start time was not 11. That was my first introduction into a whole different culture. I was one of two white people in the church, and they were speaking in tongues, and they were running around and falling over. And I was like, what did I agreed to go to church, but what is this? Um, and so that I was just in awe, staring the whole time at everybody, right? Because it's a completely different experience. I grew up in a very strict
Mm-hmm.
cessationist church. to see that was just, I mean, I was already uncomfortable because I was the minority, and that was also a first in my life. Um, and then they did the end of the service where it's the altar call, which is where you can go to the front to get prayed over, and he like got up in line to go up to the front, and I'm meanwhile also ugly crying through this whole service and not understanding why I can't stop crying. Now I know it was the Holy Spirit, but then I was just lost. And then um, the pastor called me out by name. I had never met this woman before in my life. I did not know her. She did not know me. She called me out by my name.
Just first name or first and last name,
I think it was just my first name.
but still by name.
By name. Yeah. So I go to the front, and she tells me she wants to talk to me after service off in a side room. And he like leans over and gets real close to my face. He's like, "You listen to everything she tells you." And I'm like, "Okay." I don't know what this is. Um and so we go off into the side room, and she's like my height. This sweet little, I don't want to call her old because she wasn't old, but she was she was like a mom. She actually was a mom to like literally half the congregation. Uh, but she pulled me aside, and she's like, God misses you, and he loves you, and he wants you to stop doing what you're doing and come back to him. And I'm just like, oh my God, this woman knows everything I've ever done wrong, and that's a very long list. And I was just like, oh my, have you ever had someone give you a prophetic word and like not know that that doesn't mean they don't know everything? Like, I thought it meant she knew everything I'd ever done, and I was just like, oh my gosh. So I came back out to Ryan, and I was just like, okay, I need to process what just happened. Meanwhile, he was mad because he thought I stole his message.
So she tagged along and went, and I was like, "Sure, you can come. I need help." And then she got all the attention. I'm just like, "Guy over here got DUI. I don't like. She wasn't even supposed to come. Like, first of all, and I need help here. I don't know what's going on." And so they were all the attention was going to her. So I might have gotten a little jealous there at that. But then just to go backwards, how I knew about this church is my freshman year down there, our pastor's son from back in Peoria, he lived down there. My mom found out. And so she called him, and then she would call me in my dorm room. And while I was like drunk and they would call my cell phone, call my dorm room, and then he would be calling, and then she would do that for about 2 months of my second semester in school when she found out he was there, and so he would drag me to church, like
Mm-hmm.
and that happened for about 2 months until the first year was over. And so that's how I knew about this church. It was a church that I was dragged to, and she was a prophetic lady, and so we would it was and she would call me out, and she would make me, I would be just drunk and stinking, and she would make me go up front. She's like, you're going to be preaching the word one day, and there's going to be a bunch of people, and she would just prophesy over me and tell me all this stuff. She'd make me get up. She's like, talk. I'm like, I don't want to talk. She's like, and then she would say, she's like, you're going to be talking in front of a bunch of people one day, and so I'm going to, and she would just say this to me, and I'm just drunk, barely walking in this church. And so then my pastor's son moved away when I got to my sophomore year, and I was like, yes. And so I never went back until this day in grad school, like
Mm-hmm.
4 years later or something. And and so that's how I knew. But then during that time period, I would always tell people she was hunting me,
Oh
because
yeah.
when I was in public, I would be doing something like I might have like one of those hats on with two beers in them with the straw, and I'll just be running around doing stuff. And I turn, and she was always there. And I put my head down, and then I'll be sitting there with like a big bunch of red Solo cups and shot glasses, buying them. I turn, and she's there, and I put my head down. So like this happened like for 4 years. She would just appear every time I was doing something stupid in public, and so that was kind of the introduction to how we ended up at that church.
Mm-hmm.
So
So then, I don't know if it was that night or the next night, like we sat down to talk, and I just kind of looked at him and I was like, okay, I don't want to have sex anymore. And that was like a really scary thing for me to say to him, because one of the beliefs that I had picked up as a kid was that if you're not sleeping with your man, someone else is going to be sleeping with your man. And I don't I don't know. I don't know where I got that from. Um so I was terrified to tell him this, and he said, "Okay." And I just looked at him like, "Just okay? Like you're just okay with that? Like this is a college guy that runs a party house. Like this just was not computing in my head." And he looked at me, he said, "If you can successfully do this, I will marry you." And I was like, "Well, gloves are off now. Let's go." Cuz at that point we'd been together for I don't know, a couple of years, cuz you were 21, 22.
yeah, it was a year and a half.
Yeah, so we'd been together for a little while. Um, and so that was the start of the change. And I knew that I could not do that on my own. And my poor mother, God bless her soul, I was very open with her through all of my promiscuous years. And now I just think about the things that I told her, and I'm like, I don't know how she didn't like scream her head off. I'm sure she had to have gone and screamed in a pillow with the things. Anywho, um, I told her what we were doing, and I asked her for a purity ring, and she just kind of looked at me because she knew my background. And I was like, "Well, I need someone to hold me accountable. So if I screw up, I have to give this back to you." And so for Christmas that year, and that was in like November. So for Christmas that year, she gave me a purity ring, and I wore that ring on my left hand until the day he proposed, and then I wore it on my right hand until the day we got married. So that was like it was a long time because we didn't get married until I was 25. Yeah, I'm not salty about that at all.
She brings it up quite a bit.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and so I got like a study Bible, and the women under at the church just kind of took me under their wing, and they were so sweet, and they taught me so much, including all the things that I didn't know I was saying that were inappropriate. Since Ryan's black and I'm white, and there's cultural things that you don't know until they tell you, "Oh, sweetie, if you say that to someone else, they're gonna slap you." Um, so I had lots of lessons from them about
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of things.
Yep. And so that was our big turnaround, and I still threw parties though after that, but it took on a different kind of turn, And because a lot of my roommates were relying on like the funds from the party to pay rent and all these different things, and so I would stay up in my room, and she would be up in my room with me, and I would run the party from my room and not kind of go out and do what I normally used to do, because I wired the whole entire um, sound system to come up into my room. And so I had like multiple amps and speakers all over, and I can turn on and off different zones of the house. And I had to, and I was like, the thing is, it was kind of, it felt really icky because I'm just like, oh, I'm still doing this, but I was like, still like the mob boss type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like everybody brought the money to my room still. Everybody brought all the leftover alcohol to my room still. And because we had two bars that were running and everything, but um, we started getting involved in the church, but on the other hand, trying to wean off this whole entire party life. And by the time I was able to like graduate from grad school, I hated Carbondale so much because it's just that bad taste that it's like I couldn't escape. While I was there, I built up such a big name for myself that I felt I couldn't escape it. Like I wanted to wipe my hands with it and I couldn't. And so when I graduated, I was just like, "Get me out of this place. This place is this is hell right here. I got to get out."
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the thing is, it was there was a lot of good in Carbondale. There was some awesome ministries down there. I knew nothing of them except for that little church. I found out about some ministries after I was up here, and they were like, "Oh, you're in Carbondale. You should have been at this Chi Alpha thing down there." I was like, I know nothing about that. My life in Carbondale was different than your life in Carbondale.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's just who you hang out with. There was a lot of light down there. I just didn't go towards it except for that little church when I
Yep.
went to it.
So I imagine then right after graduating, you moved back to Peoria, or was it?
Yeah,
Uh,
I moved back to Peoria and started trying to build up our family catering company. Mandy was still down in Carbondale, and so we did the long distance thing for quite a while.
It was over a year because I still had another. You graduated in May with your master's.
I graduated in December.
With your master's?
Yeah, in December of
Okay.
2008.
And then I had another semester down there, and then I had a semester of student teaching where I thankfully wasn't in Carbondale. I lived with my family for that, and then I still didn't move up to Peoria until another like August 2010. I moved up to Peoria.
okay.
So, and I graduated with my bachelor's in December of 2009. So
Almost 2 years.
yeah, we did
Mm-hmm.
long distance for a very long time.
Oh wow.
For a very long time.
I can't imagine doing that, but
Yeah.
Well,
God takes you through it. I'm sure.
it wasn't fun, but I don't know. You have a lot of conversations though.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of phone calls because of that, and I I put my head down and worked. He was working, so like it was phone calls and work, and that's pretty much what we both did during that time.
And she was growing closer to God. It was pretty awesome to see as her growth, um and then I kind of backslid a little bit in there, but then I was growing too in there. So
Yeah, because I mean, his family is a really good support network of like if they see one of them in trouble, they will
Mm-hmm.
all reach out. Especially him and his brother, they're very good at being there for each other. If they see one or the other struggling with something, they'll be right there. Not, I mean, his sisters live out of state, so it was a little bit different with them. But
Yeah.
and he worked mainly with his brother during that time too, so that helped, I think.
yeah, and he was training for the NFL, so I was training for the NFL because he was training for the NFL. So it's weird, but if he's working out and I was with him, so we were in the gym like for 3 4 hours a day, and people were like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I cook."
And I lift weights. Yeah, I went to the gym with them once when I was visiting. That was the dumbest idea I ever had. I was just sitting there like, are we ready to go yet? No. Okay. We're just gonna sit here for another 2 hours. Can I get something to eat? Like, no. So that was that. And then I moved up here and I started working in the family business with them, which sometimes I joke was a really terrible thing because working with your in-laws before they're your in-laws, you see a whole other side of people, right, when you work
Mm-hmm.
with them than when you like
Oh
do
yeah.
life with them. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic of this is my boyfriend's mom, but she's also the one that writes my paychecks. So that was just an interesting conversation. And his dad, I never knew what to do with him because he was so honest, sometimes painfully so, um, but in a good way. It was in a good
Mm-hmm.
way. And then we got engaged at Christmas, like the day after Christmas. So
Boxing Day.
yeah, it was a very salty time because he had not proposed and Christmas had come and gone, and I was mad. Um, and then he proposed in front of the church the next day, and I knocked his one-legged uncle down
Like
to
a linebacker.
to get
Just
to him.
blew through him. I was up front with the ring and everything, and when I was just watching this melee happen, he got up, and my uncle, he had like a stroke and stuff, and he had one leg from a motorcycle accident when he was a little younger, and he just got up to give Mandy a hug because he liked giving people hugs, and she just like blew through him. I saw him fly back. I was like, "Whoa!" But I don't even think she. If I didn't tell her she did that, I don't think she would have noticed.
No, his brother has it on tape somewhere, because they both like to bring it up. And I mean, I brought it at this time because it is kind of
Mm-hmm.
funny. Um, and then I mean, from there we worked together and we started a restaurant together. And his family restaurant, I was just I was just doing me. I was doing administrative stuff, like making sure all the training manuals were there and all that kind of good stuff. And I would say we were in like this easy spot with Christianity, right? We were both very comfortable for
Mm-hmm.
many years. And then like we found out we were pregnant with our oldest, and running a restaurant in a small town is hard, especially if the building is very large and the town is not. Um, and so the town was not actually big enough to support the restaurant, and it was too far from Peoria to have the pull it needed to survive. And
Yep.
so we got kind of poor.
Very poor. Like
Mm-hmm.
we were living off of like one paycheck. Sometimes both of us were in we didn't make enough in the restaurant to get paid, and so she would wait tables, and that's what we live off of her is at the restaurant. I'm cooking and she's waiting tables, and we're just making money off of like the tips from her waiting tables. That was how we bought and did anything.
Yeah, well, there
Wow.
was there was one time um I had our water bill to pay in cash at the city hall, and I had it next to my tithe, and I accidentally put it in the tithe box at church, and I had no shame. I went up to the guy that was in charge of the money. I was like, I put the wrong money in. I'm going to need that 50 back. This is our tithe. And he was like, "Oh, you can't give it to Jesus." I was like, "Jesus wants me to have a bath too, man. Give me that money back." And he did. Like, he was actually really nice about it. Because how many people are you going to have want to reach their hand back in the offering basket to get their money?
Mm-hmm.
But I surely did, because I did not have the faith that I was going to get covered otherwise. And so we learned how to trust, through that pregnancy and that delivery, because I had this misconception that, well, if we got pregnant and we were going to have a baby, that means that everything financially is just going to be taken care of, right? It's just going to be we're just going to be blessed beyond measure, and it's going to be great. That's not how it happens. For some people it does. That's not the journey that we went through.
Right. It got worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so like Lizzie was born and we were in the restaurant, and I just remember like being on the hotline cooking, and Mandy, like a waitress, would call in, and she would have to wait. Mandy would have to then wait tables, and so then all I know is they had those little bumbo seats that you put
Yep.
the baby in. There would be Lizzie sitting on a bumbo seat on the table across from me, just staring at me and screaming while I'm making food. I'm just like and just messing up orders because my baby is sitting and just staring at me and watching me and following me back and forth. And then I jump off the line and I hug her and I put her back in, and she just turns all red and just screaming. And so that was kind of our life for a while. And then we made sure our employees, like, they never missed pay. They always got
Mhm.
paid. They always got taken care of. But we would always be the ones that took the brunt, didn't get paid, and it was long hours. We had a coffee shop that opened at like what,
It was at 6, and then we moved it back to 7 when we saw that people weren't coming in the 6
yeah,
o'clock hour. Which, by the way,
Mhm.
again, in a small town, people don't come to a coffee shop; they go to Casey's.
Yep.
hmm
Yep. Yeah, learned that the hard way. Um,
so but I would get there in the morning to open up, and we would switch back and forth, and so we were there around like 5 something in the morning, open up, and then sometimes we had a banquet hall too, and so we would have an event, and it might go until like 2 a.m. And then you go home, and then you yeah. So that
Mhm.
was our days, working very long hours and not getting paid for it a lot of the times, like most of the time, not getting paid. And when we ended up finally closing the restaurant, we were in so much debt and didn't have, and we still had some weddings on the book, so I couldn't get like a actual job somewhere because I had to fulfill the contracts. And we were basically on our way to being homeless.
yeah, his brother and his brother's wife stepped in. They had recently moved into a house that they had renovated, and it had 3 bedrooms and like a kitchenette in the basement with its own
Mm.
bathroom. And so they offered to let us move into their basement, and we would pay rent. And we didn't pay
Very
rent.
cheap rent, like
Yeah,
extremely cheap. We couldn't afford it. Like,
Yep.
we didn't pay rent for the first 3 months because we could not pay rent. We did eventually pay them back for those 3 months too, but uh, someone gifted us a minivan in that time because at that point we were pregnant with Stefan and he was coming.
Mhm.
Um, and someone gifted us a minivan, and we couldn't even pay to have the title transferred to our name.
Oh wow.
We couldn't pay the $150 to get the title transferred. And so they kept it on their insurance for like 4 months while we tried to scrape together $150 to put a title in our name. And so then I was sitting here like, okay, now I have 2 babies that I can't afford. And that was a really, really hard season for both of us. Like, he
mhm.
was struggling, as the provider. I was struggling with just how it was because at this point I'd gotten my hopes up again that, oh, there's a second baby. Like, he was, neither of those two were planned, not by us at least.
Mhm.
uh I was like, I had that hope again that, okay, well, surely God isn't going to bless us with another child if we don't have the means to support this child. And again, that was not true. So I just kept learning these things that I didn't want to learn. And he was having to deal with a wife that was disillusioned with that. And he, trying to fulfill that role of provider and take care of our family.
And I was applying for jobs every single day and going on interviews, and I was overeducated, and I didn't have the experience because my experience was in the restaurant industry,
I see.
and I couldn't get jobs. Like, I was like, I got an MBA, I got a bachelor's degree, I went to school overseas, and all this different stuff that I did. It didn't really matter. And a lot of times people were interviewing me, and I was actually more educated than them, and so they were just it was very discouraging. And then finally, I took a job delivering packages for FedEx on it was a temporary thing over the holiday. They were just taking
Mhm.
warm bodies, and I was like, I just want to work. And so then I went and just started delivering packages. Nobody asked me for my education, my background, nothing. There was no questions like that. It was like, can you walk? Can you climb? Are you tall enough? you're good. I'm like, yes, I got a job. And that's actually when we started being able to pay back for the rent, is when I started doing that. But then that was just a temporary thing. And once the holidays were over, then I was back trying to find a job. But then I think about 4 or 5 months later, I got hired on for a year. I actually got hired on with FedEx, and I did that for a year.
Okay.
And so, but yeah, there was a lot of struggle. And then during that time period, we started our mattress company at the exact same time. And yeah.
Yeah, I remember being so excited when I could like go pay for something and like I could actually just pay a bill on time and I was like there's money in the account to pay the bill. Thank you, Jesus. Um and then we got into a new like comfortable spot of okay, there's not a lot of money, but there's enough to pay the bills. Um and we got complacent, I would say, again with Jesus. And you know how like if you just get complacent with him, he'll just kind of shake things
Mm-hmm.
up. So things got shaken up. We met, well, I guess when Stefan was a baby, we'd met Pastor Bob C. And we were doing a Saturday night service with him, and then his son was at Bethel out in Redding, California. And so they're learning all these things and they're like sharing them with us. And so they were trying to get us more interested in that kind of stuff. And we were reading a book called Miracle Work by
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Sang. And that's all about like the supernatural side of God and like healings.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really easy read too if you've never read it. And then Bob was doing the Doing What Jesus Did classes at Heaven's View, and Ryan went through it first, and then I was going through it, and that was like a whole new world too. Like hearing about, realizing that the stuff in the New Testament with people being healed and raised from the dead and all that's possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we're in the middle of all this, I get a phone call from my sister, and she's like, "Mom, you need to get down here." And I'm like, "What?" Like, she'd woke me up. She's like, "Do you understand? You need to get down here," because I'm from Southern Illinois. She's like, "Mom is not doing well." My mom had a pulmonary embolism that morning at her house, and so she was being like rushed to the hospital. And well, I was like, "What?" Okay, so Ryan came home, and I'm like, we gotta go to Southern Illinois, we gotta go now." So we hopped in the car, and the whole way going down there, like everybody that we knew that it was in this vein of like the miracles was like, "You can pray for your mom and you're gonna heal her and this is gonna be great." So this is like a 2.5 hour drive, because she ended up being life flighted to a bigger hospital, and she was in Belleville, wasn't she?
I believe so.
Yeah, in Belleville, Illinois, which is just right across the river from St. Louis. um and so I am going in like, I am going to heal this woman and she's going to rise up and this stuff is going to. I knew that at that point they had lost her at least once. Um, I didn't know how many times they'd brought her back. My sister just needed me to get there safely, so she
Mm-hmm.
wasn't telling me. And then we got down there and they were like, "Okay, we have her in this vegetative coma state. What we can do is we can drop her temperature down, and then slowly try to bring it back up." And my sister was the logical one who knew my mom had a DNR, but it wasn't on file with that hospital, so they didn't know. I was the emotional one, and my dad was a hot mess because he was not prepared for this. And so I just looked at him like, "Can we pray real quick? Can we pray? I literally just walked into the hospital. Can I please pray with my family, and then we'll give you an answer." And while I was praying, and I knew that my sister was right and that we like needed to respect my mom's wishes, but I also knew that I was like, I am coming here to heal this woman. Um, she passed, and there was no coming back that time. So I was like, well, that answered our prayer, didn't it? It took it out of our hands. But at that point, I was like, I'm done. I'm off. I don't want to talk about healing. I don't want to have anything. Like, I was supposed to come down here and lay hands on this woman. I didn't even get to see her until after she was like done, time of death called. Um, and so that was a really that was really hard. And he
Mm-hmm.
he had to deal with the repercussions of like, no, we still believe in this. And I'm like, we do, and it can work for anybody else, but not me. Like, I am out. Um, and so like we had to deal with the grief of that, and then I had a miscarriage shortly thereafter, and so he finally got me in grief counseling. And I remember him telling the grief counselor, okay, so you have to deal with the fact that her mom died, and also she just had a miscarriage, so good luck with that. That poor guy. Luckily his wife had dealt with death in a very close situation, and so she sat in on all of his
Mm-hmm.
things, and when he might have been too crashed, she was there to like balance him with the emotional side that a woman needs. So that's, am I forgetting anything about that like point in time?
No, no, you're doing very well.
um and then from there, yeah, I just kind of took a back seat for a while.
And then during this time period, we're still living in the basement
Mm-hmm.
this whole time. We lived there for about 3 years.
We were
Oh,
supposed to be
really?
there for 6 months.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 6 months. And I'm crying out to God every day, just crying and crying. It's like, God, this is, you have all these prophetic words about me, about how it's going to be wealthy and how it's going to be leading and all these different things. And I want that. And I'm in this basement still, and I just want to be a homeowner. And we went and tried to like see if we can get a house, and people wouldn't respond to it. They thought we were joking, like, what, you guys can't get a house, look at you guys. And we had a bunch of student loan debt from school, and so it was a trying time, and something flipped. I don't even really know what it was, but I remember it was February of 2017, and I was just like, God, I give up. I just I can't do anything right. All I want to do is just find joy in you. That's it. I don't care about anything about myself. I'm not going to ask for anything. I don't deserve anything from you. I just want to bring you joy. And I want to find joy where you find joy. And so I would just start my day and it's like, okay, how can I bring joy to, and then his joy was my strength. Like I was filled with so much joy and just doing whatever God led me to do. And I just did it for a month, and all of a sudden everything I was praying for just started getting answered like crazy. Like our mattress shop, it did like 20 something $1,000 in sales in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And it was just everybody just started just wanting mattresses. And um, all of a sudden we get approved to get a house like in that time period. Find out that we're pregnant um,
Della.
with Della during that time period. And it's just, and then I was asked to go on a missions trip, and it's just everything that I've been praying for just start. And there was a bunch of other stuff. It's like everything just hit this fast forward, and I wasn't asking for anything anymore. And I was, but the thing is, my mindset at that point was, I'm not good for anything. That was my mindset. And when God started blessing me, I was crying. I said, stop. I don't deserve any of this. Stop doing this to me. And I got angry. I started yelling at God. And then that's when he was started rebuilding me as his son. And so I was like,
Mm-hmm.
realized I went too low. Like I got low, but I went way too low. Like I thought I was just useless and I just wanted to please him. And that's where I found joy. And he basically rebuilt me back up from that point of like I felt like can't provide for my family, can't do anything right. That was where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And then that year in June 1st, I came back from a missions trip in Trinidad and Tobago, and the first day I was back, signed contract to get a house, which was a miracle because like this is a house Mandy and Lizzie were praying for a year.
Oh, wow.
They had it up on the wall, and it was way out of our price range when we looked at it the first time. I just blacked out. I'm like, this is never going to happen. It's like, I'm trying to get like a $15,000 house that's about to fall in, and maybe me and my brother can try to build it back up and we can slowly move into it. That's what I thought
Yep.
I was looking for. And this house had everything that we put on a wish list, literally everything to a T. And it was beautiful, and it everything. And I just like, we could never afford this, and it was like $125,000, and I'm like, I said like 20,000 max, and I don't even know how we're gonna get to 20,000. And but like when we signed that paper, the lender called me up like a week prior. He said, "This is an act of God. I've never seen this happen." He's like, your down payment, you only have to pay half of what we agreed on, and your interest rate just dropped down. And it was this. He's like, I've never seen this. It's like an act of God. What's happening right now?
Hmm.
And we got that house. Like my mom didn't even believe we were gonna get the house. She had to do some paperwork because I'm self-employed,
Mm-hmm.
and she was like, they're not going to give you the house. I don't know why you're having me do all this paperwork. I was like, just do it, Mom, just do it. And then she did it, and we got that house. And so, yeah, that was.
Never underestimate the prayers of a woman and a 4-year-old. Like, we prayed for that house daily for a year because it and like when we say it had everything on our wish list, one of the things was that Ryan always wanted to be able to do a little bit of work in his own house,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're a handy guy, you understand, right? You like
Yep.
want to put your own mark on it. But I also grew up with a dad who was a carpenter, and I was like, I don't want a house where I'm going to live in a construction zone for the next 15 years. Like, few little projects, that's fine, but this house needs to be completely livable. And so there are still a few little projects here and there, but it was completely livable at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
that brings us through 2017, and so we're starting to learn more and go deeper. But I was still, at that complacent, like, I'll pray for things, but I'm not gonna believe for certain things. And then we got pregnant again, with Dominic, and Dominic is actually a twin. And
Mm.
at the first two checkups, the other baby was fine, and then the third one, there was no heartbeat on the other baby, and that messed me up. So we left the doctor's office. I am a hot mess in tears, and he's like, "What do you want to do? Who do you want to call?" And I was like, "I want to call Carrie. She is the administrator at our church, but she's not just the administrator. She is the mother of the church. She is a woman that moves in the prophetic. She moves in. She's a prayer warrior. Like, this is a woman that if you saw her in the spiritual realm, she's covered in dented and bloody armor because she is a dragon slayer. And so we called her and had her come over, and she's like, "You start declaring life over this child. We are not going to believe this." And so we were like, "Okay." That was a very long pregnancy. We found that out at week 14
Mm-hmm.
that we didn't have a second heartbeat. Um, and we prayed up until delivery day
Mm-hmm.
for that second baby's heartbeat.
We were
Mm-hmm.
praying for just a miracle, and like we go to every sonogram, it's like no baby, baby still, and we kept on that word, and we kept praying, and um, when we that was when I actually started obeying what God was telling me to do. Is during that time period. Like for years, God had been telling me to go and early in the morning and read the Bible really slow, and then also to start memorizing scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do it maybe like 2 days a week, and I would like sleeping. I wasn't consistent. Then when this pregnancy happened and we started having complications, I rearranged my whole life to focusing around my time with God in the morning. And I went to bed early. I had my clothes out. This was the most important time of day. And I would just go in and I would worship, go after God, do what he said. it was just life altering. Like he was taking me to heavenly places and revelation, and I was just like that growth during that time period was probably equivalent like 10 years worth of growth of just him just pouring in. I would come home, we'd still be like travailing, but I was just full of joy. And just there was joy in the house during this. Like we were, it's surreal to think about, but it's kind of weird to think about, I should say. But that was the beginning of like my deeper walk with God and just drawing close to Him was during that time of turmoil, I
Mm-hmm.
would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then from there, that's actually where um, that kind of birthed Budded Mata. Not kind of, it did, and
Agape.
Agape, because they're
Mm-hmm.
both under a 501c3 that's that is named after the other baby, Palia Academy, and that all came about from him having this prayer time and just doing what God told him to do every day, um, and then yeah, there was just a lot of growth during that time period, and then we had the baby, and it
Mm-hmm.
was just one, and I think I spent the first week in tears, terrified my dad who had come up to visit because he's like he didn't know what to do with me with all my crying. Um, Ryan understood, so he kind of was like, just give her space, she'll be okay. Um, and then we I was angry for a little bit because I was like we prayed and I tried to
Mm-hmm.
believe as hard as I could, and my faith wasn't enough, and so that I took a blow to my beliefs again because I was like, well, what, did I not believe hard enough? Did I not have enough faith? Um, and then as we were doing the stuff for Agape, we're watching all these videos and stuff, and you just learn that sometimes you don't know why, and that's okay to not know why. So when we meet other people that have like an unexplainable tragedy that you don't have the answer to, I'm just like, I don't ask why anymore because I don't need to know why. I can trust that this sucks on this side, but when we get to heaven it's going to be fine. And that's eternity. That's where it really matters. So, yeah, do I wish I would have had my other baby? Absolutely. I think I would have got a lot of gray hair because
Mm-hmm.
that 5 year old is a lot of work, but in the best way. He's so sweet. Uh, but the growth that I got from it and the ability to trust that I have now, that like everything's gonna, even if it doesn't work how I think things should work out, it's all gonna be okay. So
Yeah.
like that faith is there now.
We can keep going, but do you have any questions?
Not currently. It's amazing how much, I mean, sitting here, I think of questions and then you just answer them, and so I think that's how Holy Spirit works too. So I'm not even a vessel here. I'm just here to listen almost. So I guess so that brings you up to you started Agape and uh, the other ministries, and how has God worked since then? Because I'm sure He's done some powerful stuff too.
Well, even the coming about of Agape and Budded Mata, it was completely miraculous. Like what happened there to bring those two about. Um, I'll try to shorten it, but it was during this time period, and I'm seeking God, and He wakes me up in the middle of the night and with this word of revival of healing, and I'm just like, what does that mean? And so then I go and I start Googling it because that's the first thing I can think of is let's go to Google. And nothing came up that said specifically revival of healing. But then I clicked and something had something in it that had to do with it. And it was this guy. And he was like this prophetic guy from Australia. And so then I started listening to his stuff and like things that I've been asking God about, he was answering. And so then I just started deep diving into this guy's material, like all of his YouTube videos, and I started getting his current stuff. And I one day I was just binging his stuff, and I was driving around, and at this time it was like our phone plan was one like you only had so much data, and I'm using all my data because these are videos, and I'm just driving around, and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna use up all my data, and I got a lot more time this month. And so then I looked and saw McDonald's, and so I was like, I'll use their Wi-Fi. So I go into McDonald's, and I was like, oh, I gotta buy something. I can't just be here. So then it was the second time in my life where I just heard an audible voice from God. He said, go up and talk to that man over there. And I turned, and I looked, and there's this old man that was sitting at a booth. And I was like, oh no, I don't. And so I sat like a bunch of booths away from him and sat down. And I look up, he looked up at me, I looked back down, I kept eating. And then I got this message on my phone saying my mattress shop had a shipment coming in. And it'll be there in 25 minutes. And I've been delaying and procrastinating, going up to talk to him. And finally, before I left, I went up to him. I was like, "Hi, my name is Ryan." This like 80-year-old man just looked at me. He's like, "What's your 5-year plan? What are you going to do? What's your plans?" He kept on he just started drilling me. I'm looking at him. I was like, "I don't know you, old man. I don't know." I didn't say that, but that was going through my head. And I was like, I don't have a 5-year plan." And he's like, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "What?" He's like, "What are you doing tomorrow at noon?" I was like, "Nothing." He's like, "Meet me at Chick-fil-A tomorrow at noon and have your 5-year plan." I was like, "Oh, okay." And I left. I met him, and that started 10 months meeting him every week. And he would teach me about, he would talk about not for profits. And it started getting me like dreaming. And then God started just showing me things. And it started, this vision started coming to me. And through him, we started he helped me start a 501c3 is through this man.
Mm-hmm.
And so we launched a 501c3 and did all these blueprints. I had all these things, and it was huge. It's this huge plan, and Agape and Bud Matar are only parts of it. Like those are just little branches. There's about 5 or 6 branches on there. Those are just two of them. And I started saying, I was like, God, I can't do all this. I can't do this. Like this has like an agriculture and business and financial literacy and a financial thing. There's a bank in here. What is all this stuff? I was like, I can't do all of this. And so then I go to Pastor Bob, and who co-leads Agape with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I show him this. I have it all out on a bunch of pieces of paper taped together with all these little arrows pointing. It looked like those people who have those boards with the strings and stuff trying to
Yep.
find conspiracy theories. I had one of those on a piece of paper, and I'm just sitting there bug-eyed looking at Pastor Bob. I'm like, I can't do this. God showed me this. I can't do it. This is crazy. And he looks at it, and at the middle of it, there was this school. Now, Pastor Bob's son Jeremy went to Bethel, but I didn't really know what Bethel was. Like
Mm-hmm.
he just said he went to the school, and I didn't understand it. And so I'm describing the school to him, and I was like, and it's built off of like there's prophetic, and it's people doing the stuff and not just like talking about it, but like actually living it. And I was just describing the school to him. I was like, I've never seen a school like this before, but this is what God showed me. And I didn't know that Pastor Bob had was signed up that weekend to go to a school planting conference in Redding, California, and God put on his heart to about starting a school. And I'm describing the school to him and saying how I don't, and I'm trying to get him to agree with me that I need to not think about this stuff because it's too much. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to sell this to him why this is a stupid plan and I shouldn't do this. And he's like, hold that thought. And he goes to Reading, comes back. I'm meeting with, while he's gone, I'm meeting with the professor, we call him, the guy that helped me write the things. He's still trying to talk to me about not for profits. And they were trying, I had this agriculture incubator type of thing on there, which is now Bud at Mata.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, we had a garden, but things die. Like, I'm not a gardener, I'm not an agriculture person. And so this was something I really wanted to take off this thing. And I was telling them that. And so they had a bunch of people from like 5 different African countries. meet me at this meeting, and they were trying to sell me on why agriculture is needed in this plan that I had. And they were talking about in Africa how they need agriculture, and so the whole idea was like, okay, we got to do it here, reverse engineer it, and then we're going to take it around the world. And they were trying to sell it to me. I'm like, why are these guys from Africa, like Kenya and Ghana and Uganda? There's like Ethiopia. There's different countries that were there, and they were just trying to sell me like, why are they putting all their hope in me, this guy who's overwhelmed by this plan, and trying to tell me how I need to have agriculture. I remember I walked out of there and I told him, like, oh, yeah, yeah, we'll do it. I walked out and I said to God, I was like, I'm not doing this, any of this, unless you give me a sign. I'm not touching this. This is stupid. And I walked out the door, and then Pastor Bob comes back and says, hey, we got to meet. And
I have a question for you.
yes.
How many gardens do you have on the south end of Peoria now?
Oh, man.
3?
Uh,
4?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Lots of over a couple of acres.
How'd that work out for you?
And yeah, it blew up quick. It blew up quick. When God's on it, it's like I took one step and like he went 15 steps, and then it was a weird process. But yeah, it's when God's on in something, it's going to go. If you just take one, that's how grace works. You do one thing that He says, and the angels do like a bunch of things, and then it just happens and overwhelms you.
And it's really cute because he still doesn't know a whole lot about gardening and farming, but he has a team of people underneath him that absolutely love gardening and love farming. And so they all look at him and they're like, well, you're our figurehead. And he's like, I don't know. I just do what you tell me to. So it's like an ongoing joke with these other people that they tell him what to do so he can tell everybody else what to do. And it's a beautiful picture of how God works, because they all like look, they will sometimes bicker amongst themselves. But if Ryan speaks, they're all like, well, this is his thing. And so they'll listen, but really his speaking is all taking the wisdom from the people around him that know so much more than us. So that's the agriculture side. And then the agape school side is he and Bob met and they were talking about it, and then he came home and he showed me the stuff, and I got excited in my spirit, and that doesn't happen often. And so then I was like, well, let's go. I'm on board. And that started a very interesting journey of us getting a small group together and praying about it, and creating a board of advisors that are like by design. None of them are pastors, so that we don't have any issues of like, are we stealing sheep? No, they're all lay people that are just care about Holy Spirit and being led by Holy Spirit.
Very respected lay people.
Yeah, like people that you want in your corner.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're always there to pray for us if we go off kilter. And that led us into a whole new journey. One of them came and spoke at our very first semester, and she spoke about speaking in tongues. And she is just gifted exceptionally in helping people learn how to like unlock that. And so it was an introductory thing on this is what speaking in tongues is. If any of you don't speak in tongues, if you don't have your prayer language and you want it, and I did not. And so I was like, me, I'll go first. And so I was the first one down in the room. So that kind of broke the ice that this leader in this school doesn't even have a prayer language. And it took a minute, but we got there. And she encouraged me to keep going with that. And then she also was like, oh, you're going to pick up this mantle and you're going to help other people do this. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm good. And for a while there, she would let me send people to her. And then one day she wouldn't. And she was like, no, this person wants to get their prayer language. You're going to do it. And I was like, oh my gosh, God, this is just, I don't want to do this. But if there's anything I learned through Agape, it's just being willing to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are things that I've been like, I really have no desire to do this whatsoever. This is out of my comfort zone. This is uncomfortable, but I will say yes because it is you, and then some really cool things happen. So like with that girl, it was me and Ryan and her sister joined in, and I think we prayed over her for like hours. That was also something I'm not good at, like staying focused on what you're praying about for like 2 hours. That is hard. I totally feel for the disciples and the like during the passion, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I get it. I get it now. Um, but then it broke. And she got not just one prayer language, but multiple. It unlocked. And she was like translating it to English. And I was like, well, good for you. That's above my pay grade. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's not something I desire to understand. So I'm okay with that. like, but just like we've seen cool things like that happen because of our willingness to say yes, or watching people get to like experience a hug from Papa God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. It's just been really fun over the past few years watching that and getting to be a part of it, and also knowing like you start to get um like a barometer for it, right? Like you can start to tell when you've stepped away or you've gotten too complacent or too comfortable. Um and then you know like, no, I need to continue this. I need to stoke this fire. I need to add more wood and make it like he needs to be the focus, right? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that happened for you not too many months ago because he'd been really like on the get up early with God every morning for 5 years. And then he hit a wall. I don't know, like in the fall. Is it about the fall, maybe? In summer.
Yeah.
It was booth season, where he wasn't doing it every morning. And he'd noticed a shift in his countenance. I had noticed a shift too. But wisdom says, as the wife, you just pray about it. You don't necessarily point it out all the time. Um, and so, like, he has restructured his days again to make sure that is the first thing. And no matter what, God gets his time. And the amount of peace that is flowing through our house again from that is crazy. And he can always tell when I have let sleep override me getting up and having my Jesus time too, like on Monday morning when I was extra short. And he was like, come here. And he just gave me a hug. And he's like, you need to get with your Jesus. And I'm like, started to cry because I knew he was right. And that's why I was short with my kids. um, but like you're more sensitive to that the longer you're in it. And then you can't live without it
Mm-hmm.
because you just feel off. You feel icky.
Yeah. Intimacy is very important in just a flow because we do a lot of stuff. We have Agape, there's Bud Mata, we have a catering company and that does a whole bunch of things, and there's other things that come up, and a lot of them aren't related. We have houses that we do midterm rentals with, and
And
you can get overwhelmed very easily when there's a lot of stuff.
well, and then like the kids, just like you come from a big family, I'm sure you
Mm-hmm.
understand like the nature of all of our kids. They all have very different personalities and very different needs from us. Um, and then they all have extracurriculars too, because homeschoolers do socialize. My kids have friends.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends. I'm an extrovert, so if I like during the winter months, I kind of hibernate because it's cold. But at the same time, sometimes I feel like I'm dying inside if I'm in my house for too long without other people. Um, so like we balance all of the kids activities too, and making sure that they are above all of these other things. They are like, we always say that they're like our number one ministry, like if we screw up our
Mm-hmm.
kids, like that's the future. um so we always care about like where they're at first, even if it puts us behind in things. Like we had an issue earlier this week with one of our children, um who was just, voices were talking in his head and telling him things about himself that were not true. And I looked at him and I realized what it was. And I was like, ah, this is dad. Dad needs to take care of this, not mom. Because it's too much like me that dad has to be the one to speak life into him. So Ryan stopped his day for like an hour, right in the middle of the day, and put our son first in his needs. And like it was taken care of. And it just so happened that Bob was over too. So, like even stopping in the middle of the day, and we prayed and we laid hands on our son, um, to help him through that situation. And he was fine afterwards, and he was so happy the rest of the day. So it was like
Mm-hmm.
it was worth that hour out of the middle of our day to make sure that he was okay. Um, so I was going somewhere with this, but now it's just gone.
I do have a question before we kind of wrap things up. Is it, do you find it easier, or getting easier and easier to say yes to God, or do you still find things that you're like, no, I want to do my own way with this, and really struggle with it before saying yes?
I don't. I've been beat up so much of doing things my own way. I'm pretty I'm pretty like putty now. It's just like if he says go one way, and I'll like, yep, that's what I'm doing. And now what I'm learning now is saying no to other things, and like a lot of things come up. Um, I see myself being elevated, and there's both of us being elevated in ministry, and a lot of people have a lot of awesome ideals, and they'll want us or me to come into those and be like leaders in them. And I'm like, that's, God has me doing this over here. And if I do that, then I'll have to say no to something that God has me doing. And so that's been my challenge now, is just learning to say no with grace to people, and not, and like, so that they're not offended by
Mm-hmm.
it. Because if I were to say yes, then that's essentially me saying no to what God has me doing. But yeah, I'm all for saying yes to God, and very quickly. And like when I even have ideals, I don't really trust my own ideals anymore. I just like, the plans are man, but everything's still Lord. It works or go to God.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I would have a different answer.
Okay.
I would say that there are times where I still kick and scream, but I have a trusted group of women that I can be very transparent with. And they don't even all know each other. But I'll message like one of them and be like, okay, I feel like God has told me I need to do this, but I really don't want to. And she's like, well, kick and scream and then go do it. Put on your good girl panties and go take care of what he told you to do. I'm like, but I don't want to do it. And she's like, but you gotta. And so, I don't know. I think it's good to have those people in your corner that are willing to hold you accountable and that you can be completely honest with. And then, well, not too long ago, there was something else that happened that one of the women, I let her know a situation that was unpleasant. And she was like, well, this is what you need to do. And I said, well, honestly, I've been burned by this person before, and I don't know if I have that ability. Um, I'm too. I want to protect myself too much. And she's like, I understand, and that's okay. God will give you the grace at the right time to do what you're supposed to do. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So I don't know. I think it's like I will still kick and scream. And sometimes I look like that kid that doesn't want to go to bed dragging their teddy with their thumb in their mouth, going to do what God has told me to do. And then it always turns out fine.
Mm-hmm. Usually does. Well, before we wrap this up, is there anything else on your mind or on your heart that you want to share to our audience before we close it down?
Sorry I took so much of your time.
Yeah.
That's fine.
The only thing that comes to my mind is it's a story, so I can probably share it quick. Just showing the miraculous things and how it all fits together. So there's that the lady that she was talking about that we worked with to speaking tongues to. How I met her was I was doing an activation for Agape in our trial semester, I think it was, down by the river, and I was praying and picking up trash, and I was yelling at God because now I took one step forward in the urban agriculture thing, and it just blew up. And so we have three gardens like after like a few weeks, and we need workers, and now it's like more responsibility. There's more problems now. They just mounting, and I don't know anything about agriculture, so I'm panicking. And I'm just like, God, you told me to do this stupid garden thing. I don't want to do this. And now we need money, we need people, and everybody's looking at me. And so then the activation was, um, just sit and ask Holy Spirit to show you something. So they showed me something green. I was like, okay, show me something. Someone with glasses, and then they said ankle, and I wrote it down on a little notebook. And then I went picking up trash and yelling at God in my little prayer time. And I came out of the woods down by the river, and I see someone sitting just looking at the water in a green sweatshirt that looked like the one in my vision. I was like, okay. I get a little closer, and this woman turns, and she has glasses on. I'm like, oh crap! I got to ask her about her ankle. And so I get up closer to her, and I was like, excuse me. And she looks at me. I was like, can I ask you a question? I said, do you have any pain in your ankle? And she just like, her eyes got really big. And she's like, yeah. It's like, well, let me pray for your ankle. And she's like, okay. And I prayed, and I started asking her about her walk with God. And she was like, well, I'm kind of drifting. I'm away. I've been away from God. And you could tell it was hurting her. And and then she was like, this ankle, I injured it a long time ago. And what I used to do is I used to work in gardens on the south side of Peoria. And then I injured the ankle and I couldn't do gardens anymore. I looked at her, it's like, well, your ankle's healed right now. I need help. And so things like that just continually happen, just following God. And so, and everything just ties together, and it's an adventure. Mm.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks a lot for sharing. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yes. Have a good rest of your day.